You're listening to the Rapley's Fusion podcast.
It's a real hero story to be told with the alternates.
I was going to say, that's a film, isn't it?
They are incredible.
The split personalities are different versions of me.
Delighted to be joined by Joey today. So first of all, how are you doing? And I know that you've had an exciting trip out to America as well. So, yeah.
No, I'm good. Thank you for having me. Yeah, so I've just been out to the US, to Florida, with about 400 cheerleaders and about 50 coaches and delegation. I chair the national governing body for the sport of cheerleading in England, and we took about 400 athletes as part of the Team England delegation out to compete at the World Cheerleading Championships, which is an incredible experience. We've grown in strength year on year in terms of the athletes and the teams that we're taking. We've been taking teams for coming up to 10 years now out to the Worlds, and the number of athletes we've taken has grown. So it's a huge operation, as you can imagine, with coaches and physios and federation delegates and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's everything, you come from a film perspective. It's everything you kind of imagine as you walk around ESPN wide world of sports. There's cheerleaders absolutely everywhere, sort of throwing each other up in the air and wandering around with their massive backpacks, and it's a real vibe.
Yeah. What exactly is your role with SportCheer England?
Yeah, so I'm the chair of the board, but SportCheer England is the national governing body for the sport, but it's a bit of an unusual situation in England in that cheerleading's been going in the UK for about 30 years, but it's never had any kind of governance in the way that, if you know football or cricket or anything like that, the ECB for cricket's been going for 150 years, and they developed, the framework for governance for the sport. Whereas cheerleading in the UK started organically with parents who had seen cheerleading on TV and in movies and wanted their kids to do it, or their kids were convincing them to do it, and they contacted Americans, got them to come over. They started developing teams, and then some of those mums and dads went on to start competition event companies, and so they started its own sort of little private ecosystem, which grew exponentially. We now have like 90,000 athletes in the UK, and about 7 years ago, when the international governing body for the sport globally was looking to apply for the Olympics, they came to all the different countries, and some already had national governing bodies. Some of them had grown the traditional way, but in the UK, we were very much like the US. We'd grown out of this kind of private, organic way of doing competition and stuff. And they said, look, you need a framework, you need a federation. We'd like you to go away and develop one. So while the sport's been going in the UK for 30 years, in terms of any sort of governance framework, it's been going for 6 or 7. And so it's a bit like a startup company, really. So I'm the chair, but I've also taken on over that kind of period, like a kind of scrappy CEO role in terms of getting everything set up and working. So it's very much an executive chair role at the moment. So I'm still got my fingers in all the pies and all the pieces, but we've got an incredible team of board directors now, and starting to develop sort of leads and an operational team. But it's still really new in that respect. But yeah, so I lead that organisation. Is probably the best way to describe it.
Nice, yeah. And I can't really remember why it was exactly I reached out to SportCheer England, but I guess it was just like I wanted to learn all that I could about cheerleading if I was going to be portraying it like in this film. I think I reached out to you, and I didn't expect it to be, I don't know, I was scared a little bit, because I was thinking it's just like, I don't know how it would be, but it was just such a nice call, and you were kind of really encouraging with the film and like offering help with it. And one of the things that you said was like, you have an interest in filmmaking and just movies in general. Do you have experience in films? And because you were offering really cool advice like health and safety, like the important stuff, like you have to follow that if you're gonna like be doing cheerleading in the film. So yeah, like what's your experience with like movies and everything?
Yeah, so I worked in film and television for a number of years. I came into that unconventionally, and from that got into cheerleading unconventionally. So I trained professionally as a dancer when I was 18. Went off to dance school, and while I was there, at the start of my second year of training, I had an injury, and the physios told me I'd gone back after having had a surgery, and the physios the dance school where I was training basically told me that it was a career-changing injury. I was not going to be able to continue to train professionally. And that day I was walking through Leeds, crying my eyes out, because all I thought I wanted to do with my life was become a dancer. And this guy stopped me in the street, and he said, are you okay? And I don't know why, but I started, pouring I don't know, I'm going to be a dancer, and this happened and that happened. It was really sweet. It was really lovely to be in. But while we were talking, we got interrupted because it turned out he had a walkie-talkie on his hip. And he said, one second, and he walked off, he spoke into it, he came back, and I said, oh, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm working on a pilot for a show which we're just filming inside this nightclub. I'm stood outside. I'm just stood outside because I'm the AD, and I'm taking a break. And I was like, okay. And then we got interrupted again, and this girl walked out, and she said, yeah, I'm really not feeling well. I'm going to have to go home. I've just been sick. And he said, oh, of course, go. And I said, what was her job? And he said, well, she's the runner, and the runner on a show will, do everything across all the different roles. And in that moment, I just wiped my eyes and I went, I'll do that job. And he went, what do you mean? What now? And I went, yeah, because I thought I don't know what else I'm going to do. I had come from, I'd done a bit of kind of TV stuff when I'd been a lot younger and been into theatre. I'd had a few opportunities to kind of have interactions with television. And I was like, well, if I'm not going to be a dancer, what about this? And so I walked straight on that day to the set of a pilot. And it was quite an unusual experience because the producer was on set, which producers are not usually on set. And he turned out to be a producer for the BBC back in London. And I was right in there with the networking. I was like, well, I'll be moving back to London in a few weeks' time if there's anything you can get me on. And, true to his word, within a few weeks of getting back, I was running on EastEnders. I then ended up working as a runner researcher on a show called EastEnders Revealed, which was BBC Three had just launched, and we were one of their flagship launch shows, and it was a show about EastEnders. And from there, I went on to work for years on a show that it has finished now. You might be Ethan, you look too young to know it, but called The Bill, which was a police drama. And that for me was a really exciting learning ground because we got to do loads of really cool stuff there. We were on locations and on sets. We were filming stunts. We were doing all kinds of stuff. That was an incredible experience. And I then went and worked in some light entertainment shows. And it was while I was working in light entertainment, I worked on a show called Five Go Dating, and concept of the show: 5 guys, 5 girls. They all date each other over a week, and they rate their date, and the most dateable couple go on the ultimate date. It was super cheesy, and the research team had to come up with all these different dates they could go on. And one of the guys on our research team went, hey, Joey, you used to be a dancer. I've got this great idea. Why don't we send the couple on a cheerleading date, and they could make up cheers for each other and stunts for each other? Why don't you go undercover, because you're a dancer, to a couple of cheer teams, try out for them, and if you think one of them's good, maybe we could film with them and approach them. So me and another researcher called Lucy went along to a couple of cheer teams, and I got recruited and fell in love with cheerleading. And we never, as far as I remember, we never did the cheerleading date. But I ended up becoming a cheerleader and getting into cheer that way. So I kind of ran this parallel TV cheer life for a little while before I ended up going back more into kind of dance and choreography, and then cheerleading becoming my whole career.
That was one of my questions. Was like, did you do it yourself? And obviously, having that insight, like how that helps with being the chair of the board and stuff. But it's really cool, that you have the experience actually filmmaking as well. Bringing it back to cheerleading as well. Is there any movies in cheerleading that like gets the depiction of cheerleading completely wrong? And what is the best depiction of cheerleading in films?
So I was thinking about this when I was preparing for this podcast, in the sense that, you know, since cheerleading started in the to become kind of part of popular culture in around kind of like this, I mean, the 50s, 60s, 70s, you know, you've got these various stereotypical archetypal cheerleading characters, haven't you? You know, probably, you know, the listeners will be thinking like Grease, the movie, that kind of, you know, where you've got these archetypal going through into the 80s, like Teen Wolf, and then you've got like, I don't know, American Pie, Not Another Teen Movie, these real stereotypes. And, you know, those stereotypes come from somewhere, in that cheerleading began not as a sport, but it began as a sideline activity, cheering on other sports at games. There was, and remains, this kind of aesthetic that leads itself really well to sort of certain stereotypes within particularly sort of teen movies, films, depictions. I was thinking, you know, getting on to like even before like the Bring It On movies, you've got like Man of the House and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you know, all of these kind of references that Hayden Panettiere in Heroes, you know, Save the Cheerleader, Save the World. And actually she ended up in I think she's in one of the Bring It On franchise, became huge, didn't it? And I think some of those stereotypes are helpful in terms of that kind of cool aesthetic that, like, you know, girls, particularly girls who don't do sport but might try cheerleading, you know, they don't necessarily realize. So many young girls, particularly when I've run schools clubs, who've come along thinking they're going to wave pom-poms, and I've got them doing, you know, squats and press-ups, and we're throwing people in the air, and they're like, this was not what I signed up to. I signed up to be a cool girl and wave pom-poms, you know. But they fall in love with what the sport actually is. You know, there is that kind of, you know, thing about it that is cool, and it is part of pop culture, and it is, you know, does have this place in film. I mean, I think I mentioned the Bring It On franchise, and I think for a long time that was people's only reference. When I'd say I do cheerleading, they'd go, oh, like, Bring It On. And part of me was like, actually, yeah, it's not a bad depiction. Not that, I mean, you know, there's all of the storylines with Kirsten Dunst and the love stories and all of that kind of stuff. But actually, what you see on the floor, those are real cheer teams. Loads of those athletes were from a cheer team in the US called Top Gun Miami, which is incredible. An incredible all-star program. They used lots of their athletes and athletes from various other teams. So the stunts that you see, that's quite I think that was the first time in popular culture that we actually saw the reality of what that sport entails. And then I think things like Netflix, Cheer, docuseries has been really helpful for the sport in terms of giving that a bit more of a gritty reality of what it does. And I haven't yet watched, because I think it's on Peacock. We haven't got it in the UK, but they've just been a season called Stumble, which has launched, which is like a comedy about cheer. I do feel like it's slightly entering more of an era now where people are aware of it as a sport rather than just this kind of the archetypal team movie. I mean, I do love the Bring It On franchise. I think it, you know, it's got a little place in my heart because it launched around the same time that I was getting into cheer. Yeah, it's both helpful and unhelpful to have the way that cheerleading.
I remember you saying about Bring It On. I remember you saying, like, let's say, for example, Kirsten Dunst, like, would they sort of bring in a body double for her, like, stunts or something, her moves? But I remember you saying that you were a fan of it.
Yeah, I believe that she did do a few of the skills, and I think actually that's one of the things that is brilliant about cheerleading is some of those lower level skills actually can be achieved with some degree of success, with, you know, without loads and loads of training, but look really wow factor. You know, you can hold someone up at this height and they can be standing on your hands, and And someone who doesn't know how it's done is like, wow, that's amazing, so they did learn some of those lower level stunts, and then the actually trained cheerleaders did the higher level skills. I actually my whole family is involved in film, and I have a friend who was a boyfriend for years. He's with the special effects producer on Fired Up, which was a cheer film which you might have heard of.
I've seen. I like that one. Yeah, I like that one.
Do you know, it's one of the ones I haven't seen, and I feel awful because he worked on it. But I did message Raoul, and I said, I'm coming on this podcast, and it's about cheer films. And I remember you worked on Fired Up. Have you got any great stories about what it was like to work on it? Because I remember at the time him calling me, and he was out in the US and I was in the UK, and he was like, I'm just surrounded by cheerleaders. This is completely mad. This place is like... And when I spoke to him the other day and I said, do you remember any stories? The only thing he could remember to tell me is he said it was really hard to mic them up because... They barely wear any clothes. They're in all these crops and shorts, and you're trying to hide wires, and then they're trying to flip and jump all over the place, and things get tangled. So that it's hard to mic and wire cheerleaders up, apparently. But when we spoke, you were planning to work with a mixture of actors and cheerleaders as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean,
the film had a kind of a mixture of both in it.
The dream would have been, to get as many cheerleaders as possible. But I guess, and your advice, which was, great, it was try and reach out to an already established team, that are already together so you can just get them in. But it never came about. So we just had a bunch of actors with no cheer experience, a bit of gymnastics, a bit of dancing. But as you were saying, learn the basic moves, very Bring It On inspired. Just by kind of the performance aspect of it. But it all worked out in the end.
That's great. Yeah, no, I mean, the reason I recommended to you try to find an already established team is because I think one of the misconceptions around here, SportCheer England has been, and when I had my own team as well, this happened a few times, you're approached by commercial offers, we'd like you to be in this music video, or we'd love to have you do a promo with us, or whatever it is. And the first thing is they just assume that you can do all those skills, knock them out, that they don't really require rehearsal or practice. They're like, could you do us a 10-minute routine? And we can't pay for any rehearsal time. And we're like, what on earth do you expect us to do? But the other thing is that within cheerleading, if you think about a stunt group, each individual in that stunt has a specific role. And you will often on a cheer team work with the same stunt group. And throughout a routine, you might have a bass partner that is your bass partner for years. And so you learn how to sync together, how to work together. Everybody, the whole team is on the same timing, but you have shorthand kind of connection with your group. And if you just throw random individuals together, they actually need that time to work together to build that, chemistry and that way of working, to be able to put a stunt up safely. I had a back spot who had shorthand with me, and I was a bass. If he could see that our flyer was coming out the air and there was something that we needed to do, he could talk to us while we were stunting and we'd make the correction. But we needed that relationship to already be there. And there's this huge sort of trust and relationship that's built in cheer, which again lends itself really well to telling those stories. I think often in film, when you see cheer teams, they talk about themselves as sisterhoods or family, or there's this camaraderie, and that comes from, yes, you're training together as a team all the time in the way the soccer team might train or the baseball team, but actually there's a huge amount of trust because you're throwing and catching people in the air, and you're having to do that shorthand communication constantly. And, so there's really interesting stories to tell within that, I think, that lends itself to film and television, and also to that sort of I think a lot of people don't realise that cheerleaders are super tough. Everyone imagines that they're all blonde hair and makeup, but those girls and boys, they're covered in bruises. People on my team have broken noses where someone's been flying down through the air and stuck their elbow out and whatever else. They're hardy athletes, and so there's that story to tell as well. And I guess when you look at things like the Heroes series that was on television, and Hayden Panettiere's character, she's a tough cookie, because cheerleaders are, and I like that being a different type of story that was told.
Those films and series that you've mentioned, they're American mostly. Do you think it's different in the UK compared to America? Is it just the same sport?
I mean, we very much, the origin of the sport is the US, and very much there's elements of that retained within what we call the all-star competition framework in the UK. And lots of cheer teams from the UK now travel out to the US to compete, and we're really good. We bring home world's titles at club and international level, and there's always stuff to learn from the US, but I do think that we have our own special British way of doing things, and I really like that. I like that it's a bit different. European cheer in general has a slightly different kind of feel to it, and I think it's because it doesn't have quite that same attachment to the tradition. It doesn't have, although I spend a lot of time, less now, but when I first started being involved with SportCheer England, I spent a lot of my time advocating to people about what cheer was. I'd go to sports conferences and I'd feel like I was constantly having to defend myself, especially in the kind of women in sports space, where women quite rightly are fighting for equality and parity within football or basketball or whatever the spaces, cricket, whatever the spaces are. We felt like an outlier because I was there going, well, 98% of our sport is female, and people would find it was almost working against them that it had this sort of stereotypical female aesthetic to it. They were there trying to say, well, girls can be tough and get muddy, and I'm going, girls can also throw each other in the air while wearing glitter and having a quite a female feminine aesthetic to it. So I spent a lot of time advocating for what cheer wasn't, and I think, but despite that, I do think that in Europe we benefit from not having had that sort of, or not having a culture of sideline high school cheer in the same way. There is lots of cheerleading that happens now in secondary schools, but it's not for another team, it's the sport. And particularly on Team England, in the past, where we've been at World Championships, we've had some of our Team England teams, the flyers will go up into the top stunt, so they'll be super high up in the air, and instead of just hitting their high V or whatever it is, they all pretend to drink tea. That's previously been one of our moves, to kind of keep that Britishness, and across the performance cheer piece. So there's cheer, which is what we've mainly been talking about, all the backflips, pyramids, etc. But performance cheer, which is the kind of competitive dance, like the pom dance and that kind of stuff. We had a hip hop team this year that took gold at the World Cheerleading Championships in the performance division, and the routine was to 21 Seconds by So Solid Crew, and it was just so British. It just had this really great, the Americans couldn't have done that. It's a vibe, the UK, it was very much a UK vibe. And I do love that. I think we are a little bit different, because we don't have those same attachments. Yeah.
Is there, because you're performing in front of these massive audiences, is there sort of cheerleader influencers now in the UK where people look up to them and kind of inspired by a particular person in there?
Yes, Ethan, and they have a name. They are cheerlebrities. Known as, or not so fondly known, those are people grown at the name cheerlebrities. But yeah, there are lots of cheer influencers, and I think there's think what's happened with shows like Cheer on Netflix, where it's been a docu-series rather than a drama, where those guys are real athletes, and they've looked to, well, how can I leverage this opportunity for commercial opportunities? People like Gabby Butler, who was one of the athletes that had quite a high profile on the Cheer series. She was already a very successful cheerleader, very well-known cheerleader outside of the Netflix show. Really leveraged that opportunity to be more of an influencer, to get commercial sponsorship and corporate sponsorship deals, and people seeing that and going, actually, are there ways that we can leverage that kind of athlete influencer space? And the UK has that too. Not quite as much as the US, because they haven't had those opportunities. I mean, for my generation, which was the infancy of social media, there was an athlete called Maddie Gardner who everyone knew. Everyone was trying to get hold of the VHS tapes of her at Worlds, because she did the first ever ball up 360 to heel stretch, which is like this crazy skill that no one had ever seen before at the time, and people were getting these videos. Oh my gosh, how do we get hold of Maddie? And what Maddie did, and where we first also met Gabby, was YouTube series. So there were YouTube series, and there were, bits on YouTube where Fox News had done a feature on Maddie or whatever it was. And in the last 6 months, the first ever professional league of cheerleading has launched in the US. So we have our first ever pro league. So up until 6 months ago, cheerleaders could not go professional. It was a completely amateur sport. So they now have their first pro league. And Maddie Gardner, very cleverly, she went on to have her own completely separate career as a state news anchor. So she had news broadcasting experience. They've employed Maddie as the host and pundit for the new pro league, which for me is an absolute stroke of genius, because as well as hooking in that young crowd to what they're seeing in the pro league, there are also people like me are going, oh my God, Maddie, yes. I remember you from like 25 years ago trying to find VHSs of you and, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's definitely that influencer space now with social media, and for me, that's a really tricky space when you get to the fact that predominantly this is a youth sport. So, the pro league are over 18s, and we need to look at how we can develop athlete personalities, because that's how you grow the fan base. If I think about some of the other sports that I perhaps didn't know so much about, I wasn't really a fan of tennis. But then I really loved Venus and Serena Williams and what they were doing in completely other spaces. And that hooked me into tennis through that. And then I'm starting to see, do you know what I mean? So I do think from a commercial perspective, there's a really important space for how we elevate individual athletes within a team sport, in terms of their kind of voice. But I think there's also this huge risk when we talk about the fact that it's predominantly youth sport and how we protect those young athletes in the sport, because there are like 14-year-olds who also want to be like Gabby Butler and have their own Instagram channel or whatever it is. And, we see a lot of mums running Instagram pages for their kids, trying to, elevate the athletes, personality and status, so that maybe that might help get them, brand deals or whatever it is. And in that respect, yeah, it makes me nervous. You see, but it's just like Dance Mums, and I'm like,
but it's just like, I guess in football, like trying to push their kid to be a footballer or something, isn't it? It's like a sport. And I just, because you brought up like that sipping tea celebration, I just thought that's such an iconic image, isn't it? So
yeah,
people will be looking up at that
moment.
And on the pro cheer,
I think. No, go.
On the pro cheer league, I spoke with Hayley Hayley Dean Smith. She's a part of the Pro Cheer League, and I asked her, going back into filmmaking, like if there was any actor that would play you in a film, who would it be? And she said Margot Robbie. I want to ask you the same question.
Oh gosh.
And if you're gonna make a cheerleading film, like who would be the actors that you'd like to see?
Let's see. I think, you know, I really love the kind of cheer depictions that we've seen where they are a bit more gritty, where people are understanding a bit more about the sport. I have a lot of love for Gabrielle Union, who was in the original Cheerleaders, the original Bring It On series. I think she's a fantastic advocate for girls' and women's rights, using her voice as an actress. And I love those kind of strong female leads. To see them depicted on film, and to be showing the realness of what our sport is about. I would really love to see a film that did that well, that didn't consistently lean into the stereotypes. Although I get it, and some of those stereotypes, they're for, like I said, that they're for a reason. That, you know, there are elements of the sport, particularly in the US, where there's still, you know, all high school teams have cheer teams, and I'm sure that you know, you get those kinds of girls and boys on those teams that are stereotypes like you do in any sport. But yeah, that is a good question. I'm a big I'm an 80s kid, and I'm a big fan of kind of 80s kind of style films. So I'd love to see something. I'm not answering your question really, am I, in terms of who I'd put in that film? But I'd love to see something that had a kind of an 80s aesthetic influence to it, because I do love that period of cheer, in terms of what they wore and the kind of more collegiate look. You know, that one of the things that I find so exciting about cheerleading is that intersection between not only contemporary culture but also fashion and music. I think that's really an exciting space, because cheerleaders perform to music. So I think with film there's this real opportunity to build a really exciting soundtrack that you know, you can build an iconic soundtrack to a film with cheer as much as you can, you know, with anything else. And yeah, I'd love something kind of 80s inspired. Who, I'm not sure. I'm a big fan here. I'm going to really tell my age, but I'm a really big fan of the Labyrinth movies, and I love Jennifer Connelly in that. So maybe Jennifer Connelly, but you know, as me now, she'd have to be a coach, wouldn't she?
Yeah.
Age wise.
Do you mean like Hey Mickey as well? Like that, those songs where like it's part of the sort of culture as well, isn't it? Like the music.
Yeah, absolutely. And cheer music has taken sort of twists and turns. You know, I think back in the back when I first started, there was a huge everybody used cheer mixes. So it would be like one bit of music, then it would cut into another piece of music, and it would cut into another piece of music, and the music was used to change the energy. You know, this is the pyramid sequence, this is the jump section, you know, you'd have a dance section, and each bit of music would have a vibe. And you know, just before my generation, you know, I've got friends who are older than me who would say that they'd be doing that from tape to tape, you know, creating those cheer mixes. And then when I was doing it, you know, we'd be burning CDs, and there's since then, quite rightly so, been a number of lawsuits that have kind of identified the fact that actually there's some music rights issues around. So cheerleading kind of split at that point, in that there's some really amazing people doing some really great work in music rights, and so you can still use popular music in your cheers. And some people do, and they pay for the music rights to do that. But what's become more popular is music that is created specifically for cheer. There are cheer music producers who produce that aesthetic, this kind of aesthetic that you've probably heard now more, which has got all the sound effects and voiceovers. There are mainly guys who rap like will rap bespoke raps over people's bits of music that talk about the team and you know, all of that kind of stuff, and it's created its own kind of musical aesthetic to it. But you're right, there is a, you know, cheerleading has existed throughout that kind of popular, you know, I was going to reference like MTV culture, you know, think of Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana, that's got cheerleaders in the background of it, of that music video, which is completely iconic, you know, and it is synonymous with pop music. And in that first Bring It On film, there's a version of Hey Mickey, which got used. And yeah, so there is that relationship between the two that I think is really iconic as well, and gives rise to lots of opportunity in the kind of film space, I think, and that aesthetic as well for bands, for pop music videos. You know, there's lots of, it's really televisual cheerleading. It's really exciting to watch, dynamic, you know, and yeah, there's not many sports that intersect with music in the way that it does.
With a pro cheer league now that you mentioned, what is next for cheerleading, or where do you see it sort of evolving in the future?
That is a really good question, and I literally just published an article on LinkedIn about that this week, because I've been thinking about the advent of the pro league. And it actually, in relation to, I don't know if you're aware of that, there's a relatively new sport in the US called banana ball, which is like a kind of really kind of dynamic short form version of baseball that also includes loads of performances and kind of different elements of theatric within the game. And this idea of looking at how we develop fan engagement, and how we create, you know, a lot of sports are finding that young people don't have the same attention spans that they used to, and they're not consuming sport in the same way they used to consume it. You know, the way banana ball came about was because Jesse Cole, who developed the sport, who loved baseball, sat and watched a 3-hour game and was like, I love playing this sport, but this is really boring. Now we're into hour 3. Like, how can we create a short form version that is televisual? And, you know, cheerleading, as I've mentioned before, already has this really dynamic televisual version to it. But once you've seen like 20 cheerleading routines, are you going to sit there every week and watch more? Maybe if you already love cheerleading, but it's not necessarily going to hook those new fans in. And you know, the pro league has the routine element, but it also has these games that test cheerleaders' skill. And I think that development is really exciting around fan engagement, short form. There's a real move to vertical docuseries across internet platforms. And the ICU, which is the International Cheer Union, it has been piloting a new vertical series. So vertical series are where you'll have like a 2-hour long documentary perhaps, but it also chops up into 1 minute shorts. So someone could watch the full length, or they could watch it in 1 minute shorts, which is how people tend to be consuming sports and television and film in general these days. And so I think sport needs to evolve to find these new ways that it can be consumed. So I think that I can definitely see cheerleading going that way in terms of how it's that experience on the screen, whether that's what the sport ends up looking like or whether there ends up being lots of different variations of the sport. And I think it's okay. You know, I think when we get into the Olympics, which I'm sure that we will do, you know, the pitch that's gone into Brisbane for Brisbane 2032 for the Olympics is 12 athletes, 6 guys, 6 girls in the co-ed format. And, you know, one of the reasons that the Olympics is really interested in it is because of the gender parity. But 12 athletes on the floor is different from what we're seeing at the World Championship level, what we see at the club level, where you're looking at between 24 and 32 athletes on the floor. And there are lots of reasons for that pitch. It's around how many athletes are allowed within the game's total, you know, and all of that kind of stuff. but the aesthetic and what that looks like is going to be very different to what we see at the club level, to what we then see in Pro League. And I think that's okay, because I think there's a space for all of it. There are some real puritists who are like, I don't want to see that in the Olympics. That's not what cheer is. And, but I think there's got to be room to evolve. And in that way, cheerleading is quite a young sport. There's lots of different versions of the way we consume soccer. For example, football, there's five-a-side, there's futsal, there's lots of different ways that's consumed and played, trick shot stuff, and I think it's okay. And maybe an audience member might watch the Pro League and then be interested to join their local club and find, other versions or formats of it. But, one of the things I was talking about in this article was, if we're preparing them to be in the Pro League, if that's what they want to do, how are we preparing them for that? Because that's a slightly different preparation to what they're, perhaps doing now a little bit.
Yeah. Do you have much power about bringing more people in or expanding it, or do you if you want to see the sport grow, what do you do about it, really?
So one of the main mandates of a national governing body is to grow and sustain the sport and protect the sport. And SportCheer England is in the process at the moment of its application to Sport England for full recognition. So we already have sport recognition. We gained that in March last year, but full national governing body recognition, which would mean that we'd be eligible for funding, for example, from Sport England. And if that happens, one of the things that they really want to see demonstrated by a governing body that they would recognise is around how we grow the grassroots. And so it's looking at campaigns, how we develop campaigns into schools, how we support clubs to engage more people. Part of that is also how we elevate the sport within press and media. I mentioned the Olympics, and I spent quite a bit of time talking with the guys at Skateboarding UK and Skateboarding GB, because they experienced the Sky Brown effect. So in the Olympics, when Sky Brown, who was, at the time, I think she was something like 12 when she won her first Olympic medal in skateboarding, but skateboarding just booms, because it was this cool young girl, and suddenly not only everyone was going, well, where's my local skateboarding club, but lots of girls were going, where's my local skateboarding club? And I want us to be ready for that Olympic springboard moment. But yeah, we have a huge mandate to grow that sport, and particularly, we're interested in also how we grow the parasport division of it. We have adaptive abilities and parasport divisions and Special Olympics recognition, and so we want to be able to equip and support clubs to also start their own disability teams, so that we're giving opportunities to disabled athletes, so that they've also got that pathway through, so that we're creating a path from grassroots to podium for all young people that want to be involved in the sport. And I think that's one of the really exciting things about cheerleading. We've mentioned before the different roles within a stunt group, for example. In some sports, there's a particular physical aesthetic or attributes that lend themselves to you being good in that sport, for example. But in cheerleading, we need people of all different body types, because everybody's got a different role to play. So if you're super tall, you're going to be a phenomenal back spot. If you're tiny, great, you're going to be easier to throw in the air. If you're a petite little thing, if you're short and stocky, you're going to make a great base, because we need you're essentially squat pressing humans in the air, so everybody has these roles. And similarly, because the routine is made up of lots of components, maybe you're really good at jumps and tumbling, but you're not a great dancer. Well, there's a moment in the routine for you to shine, and a moment for the coach to maybe move you slightly further to the back. But there's opportunities for everybody to shine and be successful. And I think that's a great story to tell about the sport in a way that you don't have that opportunity necessarily in all other sports.
I should probably know this, but is there any other Olympic sports where you have male and female competing against each other, don't you? Like, it's cool that there's genders can like work together, can't they? And because there's different roles.
Yeah, there's a huge movement within the IOC towards mixed sport, and it's one of the reasons that cheerleading has such a strong case for inclusion is because of that gender parity. There's been some developments around like mixed triathlons, so 2 males, 2 females in not triathlon. What's the one we have 4? Because tri would be 3, right? There's pentathlons, like where you've got mixed teams and mixed relay teams, but a sport where there is actual working together. There's ice skating, where you have ice skating pairs, where you've got a male and female traditionally, not always, but traditionally a male and female. But yeah, it's in that way, it's a great sport. I think male athletes quite a lot of stereotypes. And I do think that our sport is really inclusive, actually, in so many ways. And a lot of males find the space really inclusive and safe to be in, but they do fight a lot of stereotypes. But yeah, I thought that we would be in the LA 2028. To me, that seemed like the right place to be, birthplace of the sport and all of that. But there's a lot of challenge around, I mentioned, the number of athletes you have on a team. So there's a finite number of athletes that can compete in the games, and that is predominantly around logistics, how Olympic villages work, how the length of the games, etc., and how much entourage they can support within that as well. So if you think about, and so in order to introduce a new sport, you have to remove a sport. So if you think about, let's remove a track and field event. Well, a track and field event, there is 1 athlete for every country, right? If we did remove the track and field event and we replace it with cheerleading, we've now got 12 athletes for every 1 plus their entourage. So there's a huge kind of logistics dynamic that has to be figured out in that. I personally have some sports that I think shouldn't be in the Olympics that could maybe move out in our place. I'm not sure football should really be in the Olympics, and that's a team sport. But where you look at team sports that have been included, they have been reduced down versions. So like basketball is 3-on-3 when it comes to the Olympic version. So that's why we're seeing that pitch from the International Cheer Union to the IOC as a 12-person version, because I think anything less than 12, it won't look like cheerleading anymore. It will look like crow, or something like that. But they can't argue for any more, unfortunately, to be on the floor.
What list of sports would you like to take out?
Oh gosh, I think to be honest, I think football was my main one, because I just think it's for fans of the sport, and actually for the players as well. I don't think it's got as much it's not the biggest competition.
Well, yeah, you've got the World Cup, haven't you? You've got
the World Cup, Champions League. There are other tournaments which for a footballer would be the highlight of their career. Yeah. Quite often England will play their under 21s in the Olympics. They're not playing. It's not your Marcus Rashford isn't playing in the Olympics. So I think it doesn't feel right to me. And there's a huge amount of money in football. Football is a professional game, and cheerleading and indeed the sports that are in the Olympics should be amateur. Because
they're contracted to another club, that they don't want to kind of be playing too many games. Obviously, you pick up injuries, don't you? With cheerleaders, is that something where there might be if there's like more competitions and everything, they might have to prioritize certain ones and kind of like drop out the others, or is it kind of a cool schedule where they have enough time to recover?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, particularly for us with Team England, because the week after the World Cheerleading Championships is the Club World Championships. So, and they're both held in the same place. So ESPN Wide World of Sport in Florida. The first weekend is the ICU World Championships, where athletes are competing for their country as Team England or Team Spain, Japan, wherever. And then the week after is the IASF Club World Championships, where they're representing their country, but they're also there on a bid as their club. And that can sometimes cause a conflict for us. We work really hard with the club teams around training, because we send the athletes out early so that they can acclimatise, because there's the heat, the humidity in Florida. We need time to train out there as a team. And there'll be training conflicts, because although the week before is ICU Worlds and we've got athletes there with Team England, their club coaches will also be wanting them to be there training with them. And so we work really hard on these negotiations around training schedules, but for those athletes, to ensure that they can be in both. And there will sometimes be some compromises, and those club coaches are quite rightly nervous that, if they get injured at the World Cheerleading Championships, well, then they're injured the Club Worlds afterwards, which has kudos for their club. And for clubs that go out to Worlds, UK clubs, that's a huge hook to get new athletes into their gyms back home. If they can come home and say they've competed at Worlds, or they've won, or placed top 3 or top 5 or whatever at Worlds, that's athletes want to go to their gym. So, there's both the experience of going and competing, but there's also the effect that has on recruitment once they get home. And so there is this slight conflict for us that we would work really hard on managing. And all teams travel with alternates, because there is a risk that an athlete could get injured either on the floor in training or by doing something stupid. Just tripping over and twisting their ankle, and then they're out. And that's a real challenge, So we have these incredible alternates who may not touch the floor at a World Championships, but they will know at least 3 different athletes' positions on the floor, all of their stunts, all of their routine, and be ready to step in at a moment's notice. And I think it's hard because people feel like, I'm an alternate, I didn't make first team for the floor. But actually, often alternates, the people that save can save the day. There's a real hero story to be told with the alternates. I
was going to say, that's a film, isn't it?
They are incredible.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. They're it's like being an understudy or a swing in a musical theatre performance. Halfway through the show, having to go on as someone's exited to be sick, and suddenly singing whatever part. I think it is an incredible.
It's like having a family, isn't it? To have that many people around, it's just really cool. What advice would you give to people wanting to get into this sport?
Go and find a local club, and give it a try. Lots of clubs, they'll have competitive teams which will have a particular window within a season where they have tryouts, but a lot of those clubs will also run recreational classes, so an opportunity to kind of a light touch, try it out before you commit to a team, which is a fantastic opportunity. And some will require you to have done rec cheer before you go into a team, because going into a team you already need to go in with certain skills. But it's really accessible. The sport has divisions at every level. So there's kind of level 1, which is like a beginner level, 3 to level 7, which is what you see when you see the World Championships, level crazy, level, ridiculous, throwing people in the air and back tucks and twists and all of that stuff. And then everything in between. And there's this clear progression of skills that once you've mastered certain ones, then they're developed. So, okay, the first time you're going to step up into the air and you're only going to gut height, then you're going to this height. Now let's try that on one leg. Now let's try that twisting. And those skills progressions go up as you go up the through the different divisions and skills. So there's an entry point for everyone. And some people come across and join cheer from gymnastics, and so maybe they can enter at a slightly different level because their tumbling skills are more advanced already. But one of the things that has grown particularly out of Europe is non-tumbling divisions. So when cheerleading first evolved globally, the US were winning everything. Of course, they've been doing it for years, but part of that is because they had this culture of the sport where kids were going in at 4 or 5 years old. So by the time they were like 10, they were doing triple backflips and this, that, and the other, whereas our 10-year-olds had never done cheer before, and they were kind of learning how to, just do a tuck jump, and there is a way to create entry-level points for countries that haven't had that culture of tumbling from a young age. They developed the non-tumbling divisions. And actually, we're in a slightly different place now. We have got kids that have been cheering since they were 5 who are now, 18, 19. But those non-tumbling divisions are a really great way if you're older. Like if you're 16 and you've never done a backflip, you're not, that's not something that you're going to get in like 3 weeks' time. That's a skill that is achievable for someone who's 16 and never done it before. But they can go and join a non-tumbling team and already be able to be involved in a competitive kind of environment. So there's different opportunities for different people.
Yeah. And you mentioned the LinkedIn article, and I know that you write books as well. And I'd like to talk about Squad Safe. How did that come about? Have you always wrote as well, made books, and
Not at all. When I got involved with cheerleading, I also was working in dance as a dance practitioner, going into community settings, making kind of big choreography pieces with kids in schools and community settings and projects and things. And I started to become aware that there wasn't a lot of safeguarding was happening for the young people involved. My book is about a kind of practical guide to how we do safeguarding in those spaces. So I became aware from being, from lived experience that this wasn't happening. And when I got into more sort of management roles, both in dance and in cheer, I'd get people in from like the NSPCC to deliver safeguarding training for my coaches and my dance teachers. And they would say to me afterwards, well, that's great. I know a bit more about safeguarding now, but they've told us you can't touch kids. So how am I meant to spot a kid for their back, for their back tuck if I'm not allowed to touch their back? Or how do I help a young person find their center for a pirouette if I'm not allowed to touch their waist? How do we do that? And I would end up spending a good hour after that kind of working through with them. Okay, how do we do that in a sport or an art form where we are physically touching each other all the time, where there's this dynamic of trust? What does that look like in terms of consent, body autonomy, communication, and then ranging into some of the things that we've been talking about today around how branding and marketing. What does that look like when we put young people on screen and photograph them? What implications does the uniforms that we choose to put our kids in have, and all of that kind of stuff? And so I've been ruminating on all of this for ages, and doing lots of reading in the kind of leadership space about what does good culture look like? How do we build psychological safety? What's the relationship between psychological safe spaces and elite performance? Just from a personal interest, I was beginning to build up this body of research that I was doing. And it evolved into, first of all, a course. I wrote a course for that cheerleading coaches, which was the first ever bespoke safeguarding course in the world for cheerleaders, and that was hilarious because I was starting to be invited to speak at conferences. I got introduced onto a stage at an international cheerleading conference as the world's leading expert in safeguarding for cheer, and I felt like such an imposter. I was like, because I'm the only person thinking about it at the moment. And I did, in the lead up to writing the course, I went and did loads more training. I worked with the NSPCC. But what I realised was, while there was a course that people could take, there was a step before taking a course, and that was about understanding that you even needed to be thinking about these things. And I thought, what if I write a book? You might not choose to take a course because you might not feel like you need a course, but you might, out of curiosity, pick up a book. And here's a copy of the book. I have one with me. But the book is, yes, in part, it's kind of a practical guide to how do you write a safeguarding policy? What should this be about? But that's the quite dry stuff that you need to do. And actually, before we get there, we need the culture piece. And the culture piece is all that stuff. Plus, how do we think about female athlete health? Like, what is the dynamic of how we're training female athletes? We're not thinking about any of that stuff in our sport. We need to, and it has an impact on athlete welfare and their mental health. And how do we do all those bits? And I think if we get people excited about that, then they will want to do good athlete welfare and safeguarding, because they'll recognise that those things underpin each other, and they underpin good elite performance. And the reality is, we all want the same thing. We want young people to be part of a sport that we're all passionate about and love. People go into coaching because they had a fantastic experience of the sport themselves, and they want that for other people. And how do we get the best out of athletes? And I just think there's an alternative way of doing that isn't just through fear-based coaching, and aggression. And, I think sometimes coaches, their egos take over, and it becomes about them putting their performance on stage, and the athletes become the commodity. If cheerleading is a business, then your product is the athletes, right? And that shouldn't be it. We are custodians of young people, and we're developing leaders of the future. And so, this book was an attempt to launch a bit of a revolution, really, in the sport. I really believe that there is an alternative way of not just doing cheer, of doing sport in general. But I knew that if I wrote, and it's interesting, the publishers wanted me to be what they referred to as sport agnostic. They felt that if I wrote a book which wasn't specifically about a particular sport, that it would sell better. Oh. And I actually think cheerleaders wouldn't buy a sport agnostic book. They want something for them. They'll pick it up if it's something for them. Yeah. And so, against my publisher's better judgment, I wrote it specifically for the cheer community, because it is so bespoke, because our sport is so unique in so many ways. I wanted people to be able to go, well, I have this issue specifically in my sport. How do I tackle that? And to be able to give some resource and support.
Yeah, I remember an email now that you sent me saying, thank you for your interest in cheerleading because it's a niche sport. So do you think people like cheerleaders kind of want to pick it up because it's cheerleading, because it's like a niche thing? Because I'm hoping my film gets.
Yeah, I mean, we're niche. We're kind of a subculture, but a huge subculture, right? Because there's something like 4.4 billion cheerleaders in the world. I can't remember what the statistic is, but it's huge. Cheerleading is huge, but it's still a subculture in the sense that it doesn't have that same coverage as a sport. When we think that, the conversation started around film, and when we look at how cheerleading is portrayed in film, it's still, the majority of that is about high school cheer, and not the competitive sport of cheerleading. And yet there's you know, when people say to me, "Oh, you're in cheerleading in England, in the UK, do people do cheerleading in England?" And I'm like, "Yes, there's about 90,000 athletes," and they're always really shocked by that. Do you know what I mean? And so it's niche, but it's not niche. But I do think that we have this fantastic opportunity to engage particularly young girls in sport at an age where they are, systemically dropping out of physical activity, and the whole sports sector is talking about how do we engage girls more in physical activity, and through things like film and television and popular culture, where, I previously talked about them being unhelpful stereotypes. Actually, there's something really cool about being a cheerleader. You can do something that others can't, and maybe you're being bullied at school, but you're like, yeah, outside of school, I throw people in the air. Like, I can literally do things that you can't do. And that feeling is really cool. I remember when I was an athlete being like, yeah, I can do things that other people can't. Like, and it's really empowering. And, so to go and be part of a cheer squad is kind of cool. And it does engage girls who maybe don't, want to go on a rugby pitch. And I think it's a unique opportunity that we have. It's got to be carefully positioned, proposition, but I think it's, a brilliant sport.
That was amazing. Thanks for your time, Joey. And yeah, the book sounds great. And thanks again. I'm delighted to be joined by another one of my cheerleaders, Kalyani, also known as Kali. You play Minnie in this film. So what was it like to be a part of the film and take on this role?
It was very fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot, even with the whole rehearsing, the dancing and the cheerleading. It was so much fun, so much fun. I really enjoyed it. It just had so much energy to it. It was never just any boring moments. It was just constantly, it was on the move, constantly rehearsing. If he wasn't rehearsing, we'll be going through lines, and yeah, it was really, really fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a good day. And when you first got the script, you said to me Minnie was one that you wanted to play.
Yeah.
What stood out personally for you about that character? Because it's the one that's being lifted in the air. So was that part of it where you wanted to be that character?
Yeah, it was a weird one because I wasn't too sure about the lift, but then I thought okay, no, I'm just going to come out my comfort zone and just be open to it. And yeah, and Minnie's character, I would say she's just very, what's the word? She's very observant. So when it came to the scene where she notices, who, and I was just like, oh, okay, I definitely like that line because, she can portray that line in so many different ways. But yeah, I think the lift was probably the best part I loved, really. Yeah.
How much about cheerleading did you know before becoming a cheerleader? Because obviously our team, we didn't have any pros, and I kind of took inspiration from the films, Bring It On. But it would have been definitely nice to have a pro cheerleader there. But we just got a bunch of people. I think we did well in the end. But yeah, what was your knowledge before about cheerleading? Did you know much about it?
I didn't know much about it. I haven't done any cheerleading at all. The only thing I probably did was ballet when I was younger, and a bit of street dance. But other than that, that is it. I have no experience with cheerleading, but it was really fun. Plus, I have watched the movie Bring It On, so it was nice to just be in that present. And the costume, oh my gosh, the costume, that was so much fun. Just wearing it properly, getting into the character, it was really good.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And so yeah, I remember you did a bit of dancing, and I think that's probably helped you a bit. And you did some acting as well. I saw that on your show reel. What acting experience do you have?
Well, I've been acting for quite a while now. been acting. I did GCSE drama, got a grade 6. So from then, that really, really helped me get into acting. I was very, very shy growing up. So drama was the thing that got me out my comfort zone and got me more confident to just even be on call right now, to even be open to, do short films. And then from there, I loved it so much, continued it in college, doing acting level 3. And then from there at university now, studying acting and screenwriting. But while I've been doing all this, I've been still trying to find little opportunities to just get into the acting industry, if it's, acting or just even behind the scenes, just helping out really.
Yeah, so what is your kind of dream with acting? Is there a dream role that stands out to you? Obviously, you've done the cheerleader now. So do you want to do a bit more of that or something completely different?
Oh, that's a hard one. I think, okay. I think when it comes to acting, I see myself in so many different genres. Like I see myself in comedy, I see myself in drama, I see myself in horror, thriller, crime, all sorts. But then I definitely still want to expand my knowledge with like dance and still continue to do dance on the side. So even if there was a production that made like a dance film, that would be amazing. Like Step Up and Street Dance, that would be amazing. I would definitely audition for that 100%.
Yeah, and you said screenwriting as well. So do you kind of have a plan to like write your own film, like maybe cast yourself in there? Yeah, like what ideas do you have kind of going forward, filmmaking on your own?
Yeah, so I would. That is the main goal. The main goal is to write a script for a TV series or even a short film. I have been writing a few scripts. I think it's just about my confidence again, just pushing myself out there, and making it known like this is what I can do, this is what I can write. And yeah, but definitely I would love to see something that I wrote come to life, to actually sit there and watch it. That would be absolutely amazing.
Yeah. So you do have a new project out as well, which would be cool to speak about. Unexpected Love, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, so tell me a bit about that, because I was intrigued to see you like take on this new project that kind of you have more say in like the story and everything. So yeah, tell me a bit about that.
So it kind of all started by me writing poems. I love to write poems. I've been writing poems since I was like 15, just different, all sorts of just things that have happened in my life, things that I've experienced. And at university, there was this screenwriting monologue competition. And if you submit your monologue and you win it, then it would get filmed and get casted by an actor. So I wasn't too sure about it, but then I applied for it. And what I did was I used one of my poems and made it into a monologue. And it happened to be very successful and I won the competition. So it's got casted now by an actor and it's got filmed. So yeah. I'm hoping that everyone likes it when it does come out. It goes through a range of emotions because it's about unexpected love, like a love that you're not expecting to come. It wasn't planned, it wasn't organized, it just happened just like that. You just don't expect it at all. The lecturer who organized the competition, they said that there were so many submissions, but I was not expecting it at all to win the competition at all. But when I got the email, I was just like, wow, oh my gosh. I was just so over the moon. Yeah,
just gives you a bit more like confidence probably, doing it? Because yeah. But like you mentioned like genres there, like you want to go into different genres. What genre is this? Is it like a mixture?
It's mostly romance, but there's hints of like comedy, but then there's also hints of drama. Like you probably would cry, that you probably actually would cry. So that is the feel to it. But I definitely do want to end up putting this monologue into one of my scripts that I end up doing into like a short film somehow as well. Yeah.
Yeah, because you've had a bit of experience like acting in short films. So yeah, I guess like maybe the next step for you is to do your own, and that's pretty cool. It was definitely a challenge, the Cheerleader, getting everyone together, and as you were saying there, like the mixture in genres, you kind of don't know how to describe it sometimes because it's a range of emotions in it, and I kind of just try to put in so much in my film as well. So yeah, like what university do you go to, and kind of how do they help you and like support you come out your shell a bit more, and like actors as well you need like in this film to get you that cast? Like how have they helped you push yourself forward?
So I go to University of Worcester, and once applying, I'll be honest, this was my last option. I was going to go to drama schools and universities all in London. That was my main goal. But then something stood out to me about University of Worcester is the fact that I could do a joint honours with acting and screenwriting, because during that time when I was applying, I wasn't too sure about if I wanted to go to the acting field or the script field. So I think, okay, let me do both of the joint honours so I can get the feel and eventually figure out if I want to do, both or just do one. I would say I still want to do both. I would say I still want to do both. I think the university has helped me in so much ways with just with the third years, like helping us, like we can watch their shows, and then even with the screenwriters, the third years, they sometimes come into our lecturers and help us like read proof our scripts to check it over if there's anything that they think that we should add or take away. And there's just so many opportunities. I feel like also with the film production course, there's always opportunities to help them with their films. Like there's always posters around the university saying, would you like to act in this film, casting calls and things like that.
Yeah. And like, so is there any inspiration that you have like acting wise, and then maybe screenwriting wise? Is there like someone that you look up to and are inspired by?
Okay, so for acting wise, I think my main inspiration is, there's a range. So for an example, we've got Kevin Hart. I find him so funny, absolutely hilarious, and I think that will probably be the main actor. And then I also have some other inspiration, which is mostly like family, which I've got two older brothers who do acting as well. One of them is in season 13 and I think a bit of season 14 of NCIS, and he's like one of the main cast actors in it as well. So once he got onto that was like, oh my gosh, like this is what I want to get into as well. He's my inspiration. And then I also have another brother who does acting, but he mostly does like adverts. Like he does adverts for Haribo, for Audi, for like different like body care products and stuff like that. So I think they're my main inspirations. For screenwriting, I don't think I've got an inspiration person for screenwriting, I'll be honest. I just go with the flow, and I like to read other people's scripts, but I wouldn't say I've got a inspiration as a scriptwriter. Yeah, like do your like lecturers, because I've never been to film school, like I looked around a few, do your lecturers like in the screenwriting bit make their own films as well? Like, yes they do. So once when I was in first year, our first like introduction class, our teacher, he was just explaining to us like what screenwriting is about and things like that, and then he ended up showing us this episode of Doctors that he wrote, and I was like, oh my gosh, you could see it on the screen. It said Doctors and the name written by him, and it was nice to watch that episode of something that that is quite well known, Doctors, that he wrote it. So that was a bit like, okay, cool, this is definitely the course that I want to get into.
Yeah, for people like Nat from Birmingham that are listening, Doctors seems to be like a cool place. A lot of Midlands people get opportunities, so yeah, that's pretty cool. So yeah, like going back to making your own films and everything, if there was a biopic like that you were doing about yourself, so a movie about yourself, your own life, like I know that, you know, we're both young, but who would you kind of cast in it, and what would you call the film, and what would the film kind of be about?
Oh, that's a hard one. I think that's quite interesting, only because for my final project, that I'm doing in third year, this is kind of similar to what I'm going to be planning. So the final project is a performance based on me. I'm going to call it the version that I show of you, which is going to be about split personality disorder, but the split personalities are different versions of me. So that's the idea that I'm going for. So I think that fits quite well. And I think actor-wise, I don't know who I would cast. I actually don't have a clue.
We've asked this question to everyone. We've had a few Zendayas, we've had a few the popular ones like Tom Holland, but no one's went with a gender swap like a Kevin Hart, for example. For you, like no one's really.
It's a weird one. It's such a weird one because I think I would do Kevin Hart just to make it a bit different. Meaning, I think there's this film by Kevin Hart, and I think it's called, what's it called? I could be wrong. I think it's called Parenthood, where you can definitely, where he's grieving over his wife who's just died during labour, and that was such a nice film to see him in the light that is not comedy, to see him distressed, to see him emotional, to see him crying. That was definitely something interesting. So if I was to do a final project and I would cast him, I'd definitely cast him just to see him in different emotions, because we're so used to seeing him in that comedy aspect.
Yeah. There's also a series called True Story. Have you seen that?
True Stories?
With Kevin Hart.
No.
That's not really he's funny in it, but it's about hiding a murder, I think, if I can remember correctly.
Yes, I have seen that one. That one was really good. That one was really good. Yeah.
Yeah, so how is the process of Unexpected Love, this your own short film, going?
So with the process, I wasn't too into what was going on, because once we finalized that I was the winner, they said that, so because you do an acting course as well, you can either cast for your own short film, or you can get an actor to come in. So I got one of my friends who's also on the acting course to act in it, and she did absolutely amazing on it. But I mostly just said to my lecturer that I want to just be behind the scenes, how a scriptwriter would be behind the scenes, not really directing, or not being aware of what's really going on. I'm just there, just sitting there watching, just looking at what's going on. So that is literally what I did. I didn't really know the process. You just got there to the studio, they set up all the lighting, all the props and everything. And my lecturer, his director, so he directed it, just showed her how to, portray each line, and where he wanted her to sit and things like that. It was a nice thing, but again, he kept on he kept on checking on me, saying, "Oh, you know, do I like that? Do I like that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Like, that's absolutely amazing. Whatever you think is great, I'm happy with." Because when it comes to the real world, the script writer has no say in anything. You wrote the script, and that is it. There's no say in how it gets portrayed by the actor. So that was quite nice to just be in the field of a script writer, really. Yeah.
Yeah. And like being around these people, does that help you when you're surrounding yourself with people that have like that experience? You mentioned your lecturers there. Like, do you watch their films and kind of learn from it a bit? And yeah, like who do you surround yourself to kind of get the best out of yourself?
Yeah, I tend to just surround myself as much as I can around my course and the opportunities in it. I'll always email my lecturer and say, "Oh, is there any opportunities like as a scriptwriter or as an actor?" For my lecturer, she's always sent me like different acting agencies based in the UK, based in Brum. So it's quite nice to apply for things like this to just be in the field a bit more. For script writing, there was this website that my lecturer put me onto, and it's just like you can write scripts and get paid for them depending on what script you're writing, which is quite nice as well. And yeah, and there's different competitions and there's different grants that you can apply to as a script writer to just get your stuff out there, because people are always looking for something. There's always the next new idea, next new project coming out. Yeah.
This is an important question I had as well. Because you do acting, you do screenwriting, you do you do that as a study, and then you take on other opportunities as well outside, like the cheerleader as well. How do you manage it to keep it fun? Because like when I went to uni and I did like sport journalism a bit for like 6 months, I was watching football games so much that it wasn't like a hobby anymore. It was actually like making it a study. So how do you keep it fresh, really?
That is a hard one. I think.
Or is it just like so fun that you don't really worry about it? You just like
It's so weird, but I think I find it so much fun. I have so much passion for just the whole of the industry: film, acting, TV, writing. It's just everything I've known. If it's writing for script or writing poetry or performing it, I try to just stay in that industry as much as I can. So when I was writing poetry when I was around 15, I would, go to open mics and perform it at bars and stuff like that. That was just my thing. And then it just made me more confident, made me think like, yeah, I definitely enjoy this. And then the open mic, sometimes there'll be somebody with a camera recording gear, and it would end up going on like Instagram and things like this. So it's just like, wow, like this, just from one opportunity, it can get you out there. It can get you so much things. And then also networking with different people is probably just the best thing ever, to just, meet new people. And then they might have ideas like, oh yeah, you should apply for this. Oh, you should also do this. And yeah, it's very fun. I enjoy it so much. Yeah.
And one thing I noticed about you as well is that you opened a second account just for your acting, Kali_acting.
Yeah.
When people do that, I always think they're taking it serious, because they're like opening a new account. They have to put content on there. They're not just going to leave it sort of empty. So yeah, like, is that something where you're going to build that in the future, and like we can get to see more roles and more projects?
Definitely. I think mainly I've been waiting for just the good weather, really. So like once summer is here and it's prime time, that is when I'm going to just be out there doing all sorts of projects. And yeah, I want my page to just be full of acting, full of, script writing, just all sorts of different creative projects. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, looking forward to it, and thanks for your time.
Thank you.